Hi, and welcome to these immigration law conversations. The idea in these conversations is just to have a chat about upcoming and current issues of law that people are facing. And today I'm joined by Gemma Wiley of Latitude Law, and we're going to have a chat about some issues that she's facing during the current coronavirus lockdown and the effects of that and various Home Office policies. As I've said, these are meant as just informal chats, and they're not legal advice. They're not scripted. So we're just having a chat between us as two practitioners. But Gemma, what sort of work do you mainly do? So what's your day-to-day workload, even before the coronavirus lockdown?
Sure. Hi, Adam. So I'm an associate solicitor at Latitude Law. We deal with all UK inbound immigration law. My daily work, it varies massively. I do a lot of partner applications, visit visas. I deal with quite a lot of ministers of religion, kind of workers coming to the UK. So it is quite varied, and so very interesting.
And what sort of are there currently now, since coronavirus and the lockdown, what are the sort of issues that you're coming up with on a day-to-day basis now that your clients are facing and you're facing as an immigration solicitor?
Sure. So there's quite a lot of issues at the moment, and unfortunately it doesn't help that the Home Office released guidance very late. But I suppose one of the main problems at the minute is the fact that I can't book any biometric appointments. We can submit applications, so my clients are able to submit applications so we can protect their status in the UK, but there's quite a big backlog because I've got quite a lot of clients who, as part of their applications, need to enrol their biometric information, but we're unable to book their appointments just because of the closure of the biometric enrolment centres. In light of kind of the Prime Minister's announcements recently, it seems that lockdown should ease. So we're hoping that the centres should reopen reasonably soon, but there's just no kind of indication as to when they're going to reopen, either in the UK or over the world.
Yeah, I still think it is important for people to make applications and not become overstayers, because I think probably people are not aware that the concession by the Home Office is just for those who want to leave, and for those who want to stay long term, they still need to make those applications.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. I think there's a problem with the concession as well because it only runs till the 31st of May. So obviously I've got a lot of clients whose visit visas might expire just after the 31st of May. And at the minute they've got absolutely no idea whether they can leave the UK, whether they can get an application submitted, whether their status will be protected any longer. So further information is definitely needed.
And I should have said this, we're recording on the 12th of May and we still haven't had an announcement yet. I suppose I'm expecting the concession to be extended, given that there's been an easing of lockdown but not an ending of lockdown. I expect the concession to extend a bit. What about you? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I imagine it would be extended. I was actually talking to a solicitor in Ireland yesterday because I had a client in Ireland, and their blanket extension ran till I think it was the 20th of May, and my client's leave expired in Ireland on the 21st of May, and they still don't have an announcement over there either.
No, so there's real sense of uncertainty and anxiousness amongst clients. What are you finding in terms of the financial situation? Because, say, let's look at Appendix FM. There are the financial requirements and specified evidence that is needed. And
sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, and a lot of people now perhaps are furloughed or self-employed people, maybe just not generating the business and have had to get government loans and the like. So what are you finding there?
Yeah, so the financial requirement is very, very strict, and there's a lot of documents that you need to provide, and it's often quite difficult getting a client to come under the financial requirement and demonstrating that all the requirements can be met. The income is 18,600, and at the minute there's been no changes, there's been no announcements as to how the Home Office will be considering kind of workers who have been furloughed. I'd expect it to work very similar to how it works for someone who's on maternity leave. So, for example, someone who's on maternity leave could rely on a 6-month period of employment that was immediately before the commencement of maternity leave, or they could split it. So they could rely on perhaps 3 months and then 3 months after the maternity leave. That would make sense to me, but whether the Home Office will announce something similar for the furloughing scheme for employees, I've no idea. The problem would be potentially for self-employed people. There's been kind of no announcements, and even the maternity kind of allowance under Appendix FM, it doesn't change the way that their income is calculated. So it's likely that even if they are unable to work, if they do have to rely on the 2020 to 2021 tax year for self-employment, it's likely that their net profit will still need to be 18,600. But like I said, I don't know at the minute.
And if you were making an application today, and somebody had difficulty with the financial requirement, would you put it in and say, well, I'm going to rely on the evidence of the earnings prior to the lockdown and say, look, they earned the 18,600 prior to the lockdown? Would you you would?
I think I'd give it a go, yeah. There are kind of provisions for exceptional circumstances, but that arguably may not be in my client's best interest, because if an application is granted on that basis, it would be on a 10-year route to settlement. So if someone had already completed 2.5 years on a 5-year route, this is the only reason why we can't extend on a 5-year route. Arguably, it's not very good to then place them in a 10-year route to settlement, because it's a very long period of time until they can get indefinite leave to remain. So yeah, I think it would be worth a shot trying to argue it on a 5-year route.
So argue at first we meet the 5-year route based on our income prior to lockdown, and in the alternative there are exceptional circumstances, so I rely on Gen 3.1 and Gen 3.2 of Appendix FM, but please don't put us on the 10-year route, because there are these exceptional circumstances. What about people who say here as overstayers? Perhaps they're in a relationship, they may be married or been living together for a couple of years, they might be children of that relationship or stepchildren. Often, and especially in these training videos, I talk about latest case law on the reasonableness of somebody leaving if they've got children. And we know recently there's been the case of Eunice from the upper tribunal, which makes that quite difficult and weighs the immigration history against the Chikwamba argument. But absolutely. What about if you can't go back and apply for entry clearance? If you normally would advise your client go back and apply for spouse entry clearance, what would you do now? So if your normal advice would be go back and apply, what would you do now where somebody can't go back and apply?
I'd apply in country. At the minute, kind of the COVID extension, it does allow someone who's in the UK as a visitor to submit an application, even if that's not extended. I think with reference to kind of Chikwamba and the Eunice case, there are exceptional circumstances which would indicate that that person cannot travel to submit an entry clearance application. So perhaps do the application from inside the UK, prove that all the requirements of the rules could be met. So for example, if they were to leave and apply for entry clearance, they could definitely get that entry clearance. And I'd expect that application to be granted, to be successful.
I suppose in one sense, this could be beneficial to people in that situation because they don't have to go and apply for entry clearance. And actually, when I read that new Eunice case, it made me think actually, well, now her case may be strengthened where it can't be said, well, just go back and apply for entry clearance.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So somebody in that Eunice case situation, you might be saying, well, you may have lost a few weeks ago in the upper tribunal, but let's stick in a new application based on COVID. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any other issues you're coming up with that are causing concern?
The only other one that I think is causing concern at the minute is fiancés. So people who have applied as a fiancé to join their fiancé in the UK, they get issued a 6-month visa. They have to marry within that 6 months, and then after marriage, we can then extend in country as the spouse of a British citizen. Now, I do have several clients in this position, and they came to the UK before the pandemic. but unfortunately they've been unable to marry. And I've got one client who originally planned to marry in April. It's now been rearranged until September, but that's after the expiry of the fiancé visa. Now, strictly applying kind of the immigration rules, we'd have to submit an entire new application to the Home Office, pay £1,033 application fee, provide all the necessary documents to prove that all the requirements of the rules can be met. And it's a bit ridiculous. Like, I'm hoping that the Home Office may announce some form of extension to, for people in that situation, because they did everything they could to marry within that initial 6-month period. And it's just a little bit unfair, really, to make them to have to do a further paid application, spend even more time in the UK when they can't work. They can't get on a route to settlement because the 5 years won't start until they get their leave as a spouse. So yeah, they're in a very difficult position at the moment, I think.
Would you say, if you had somebody with now a rearranged ceremony for September, let's presume that could go ahead in September, would you put in just a normal spouse application and ask the Home Office to not decide it until after the wedding can take place and you can submit the certificate? Or would you just...
It would be an alternative. I mean, I think strictly applying the rules, you are expected to extend that fiancé visa, aren't you? Because if you can't marry within that initial period, so yeah, an alternative would potentially be to put it on hold. But I don't know whether the Home Office would put it on hold for that amount of time, because it's potentially quite a long period of time, several months, when the registry offices are due to reopen. So it's quite tricky, really.
I suppose you can just hope that it stays in a post sack at the Home Office for those months.
I mean, well, arguably it won't be processed, but if the biometric enrolment centres reopen, you have to book the biometric appointment in accordance with the deadline. So it's something that at the minute, like, it's difficult to like provide specific advice about. It just depends what happens kind of going forward when the centres reopen, what further announcements are going to be. So watch this space.
No, absolutely. Gemma, I think that's fantastic. I think it's really interesting to look at these issues that are coming up under Appendix FM in particular, and the sort of uncertainties, but the practical steps we can take, and perhaps the advantages we can gain for those who would otherwise have to apply for entry clearance. So certainly it's worth people making applications, not becoming overstayers, and arguing exceptional circumstances, maybe asking for certain things to be paused and not considered, maybe arguing for older financial evidence to be considered, maybe arguing that entry clearance requirements would otherwise be met so they can switch in country where otherwise they would have to apply for entry clearance. If people are watching this video and want to get in touch with you personally, what's the best way to do that?
So they can contact our office, perhaps give us a telephone call. Our telephone number is 0161 234 6800.
Brilliant. Well, it's been fantastic to talk to you, Gemma. I know the internet signal has not been brilliant today, but certainly it's been great to talk and go through these issues. Thanks very much for being interrogated by me by Zoom. That's fantastic. And I hope you stay safe and healthy.
Oh, you too.
Thanks, Gemma.